Hello everyone and welcome to the weekly DeSmogCAST, where we clear the PR pollution that clouds climate science and shed some light on the biggest environmental news stories of the past week that you need to know about. Joining me this week we have Emma Gilchrist, the Executive Director of DeSmog Canada, Brendan DeMelle, Executive Director and Managing Editor of DeSmogBlog.com, and investigative journalist and DeSmog Research Fellow Steve Horn. Everybody, thanks for being here again with us this week. And Brendan, let's go ahead and kick it off with you. We've got some big news this week coming out about some of the dirty tricks from TransCanada. Go ahead and lay that out for us. What's happened?
Sure. Essentially what we have is another industry PR scandal, this time involving Edelman, the largest PR firm in the world, and its work for TransCanada Corporation, which is the company that wants to build the Keystone XL pipeline and other tar sands export pipelines. This campaign that Edelman had presented to TransCanada this summer was essentially an AstroTurf campaign designed to confuse the public and attack the industry's critics for another tar sands export pipeline called Energy East, which would take this tar sands crude oil and ship it out to the East Coast for Atlantic coast refining and export. So essentially somebody, we suspect probably somebody within Edelman, we're not sure who, but somebody leaked these documents to Greenpeace, and they are, as I said, an elaborate campaign of attack and ignore responsibility, and it's designed to attack activists. It's designed to find third-party experts, which is an old tobacco industry trick. When a corporation doesn't want to be out front arguing on its own behalf, it finds supporters, whether they're academics or friendly media, to parrot their talking points. So essentially, the big takeaway points here are that this was just a sign of what is actually an industry-wide campaign across the oil and gas and coal industries to attack their critics and to desperately try to hold on to their fossil fuel profits. So we know, for instance, that Edelman, in addition to its many decades of work for the tobacco companies, has worked for the American Petroleum Institute and other oil companies. They mention in the documents Halliburton, Shell, and ExxonMobil and Chevron. So, we suspect they've been doing this for lots of companies. And the idea, again, is to ignore acting responsibly and let the PR team, handle your public relations for you, and essentially argue that you're doing the right thing when you're not. So that's what we're seeing.
And one of the things that they actually said was, give us one of your staunchest activists on the other side, and we guarantee you we can change their minds. And it's just the audacity and this just, overall sense from the dirty energy industry that, we're bigger, we're badder, we can do whatever we want, we can, roughshod this right through anybody, we'll change your mind, or we will find a way to make you change your mind. And it's very disgusting. Everybody needs to go to DeSmogBlog.com, read the story that the documents uncovered are absolutely remarkable. And while we're on the subject of pipelines here, Steve, we actually had a quite remarkable vote this week in the U.S. Senate on the Keystone XL pipeline. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, you talked about running roughshod over community. Well, the TransCanada had a spokesperson that was attempting to do it on their behalf, Senator Mary Landrieu, who's in a runoff election right now against Representative Bill Cassidy. And that election, it takes place in about a week or two. Essentially, Landrieu is doing the bidding of the oil industry. She has a cousin who works for Shell Oil. She's been very friendly to the industry, and what ended up happening is she lost by one vote, so 59-20 to 41. The vote failed. So right now we're probably going to see it arise again in early 2015. But for now, there is no Keystone XL northern leg, and that's a good thing.
It is quite remarkable. I mean, this was the first time they've been begging for years. Bring it to a vote. Let us vote on it. Let us have a say. And, for now, while we do have a Democratic majority in the House, it gets shot down. Obviously, as you just said, probably going to change in about 2 months. But, hey, every victory counts. And, Steve, I want to stay with you here, and let's move right along. You had a very big report come out this week that you put together with Fang from Republic Report about the liquefied natural gas, just some of the tactics of the revolving door that has developed between the fossil fuel industry and some of our politicians and federal regulators. Go ahead, lay it out for us. I know it's a big report. Kind of give us the 10,000 foot there.
Yeah, well, we'll start with Mary Landrieu. I think it's a good transition. So today, Mary Landrieu, or yesterday, she held a fundraiser. One of the attendees was a lobbyist from Cheniere Energy who paid money to get there. His name is Ankit Desai. Ankit Desai used to work for Senator Joe Biden. He used to work for the Kerry Edwards campaign. Now he's a lobbyist for Cheniere. Cheniere was the first company in U.S. history to get a liquefied natural gas export terminal permit in 2012. Cheniere itself is exemplary of everything that we talk about in the report, probably the shining example of how the revolving door works. Heather Zeichel, who used to be President Obama's climate and energy czar, is now on the board of directors of Cheniere, as is the former head of the CIA, John Deutsch, who worked under the Clinton administration. But it's not just Democrats who are working for Cheniere. If you look at the main lobbying core of Cheniere, besides Ankit Desai, it's mostly ex-Bush administration people who worked for his Department of Energy, Under Secretary of Energy Spencer Abrams. So we're looking at people like Majida Murad, for example, one of his chief aides, one of Spencer Abrams' chief aides. She now is one of the heavy-hitting lobbyists for Cheniere, which they got their first terminal in the Gulf in Louisiana, in Sabine Pass, and looking to get another one in Corpus Christi. So they're not done; they're still lobbying heavy. And one of the things I want to say about Cheniere, they have the highest-paid CEO in corporate America. He gets paid last year a salary of $142 million. The board of directors was so upset about that salary that they filed a lawsuit against him, and they ended up losing. So Cheniere is just one example. And one other company I'll just point out really quickly is Sempra Energy, another company that got an LNG export permit this year. One of their lobbyists is David Leiter, who works at a high level for the Clinton administration. His wife, Tammy Luzado, is the former chief of staff for potential 2016 Democratic Party nominee Hillary Clinton. So these are really, really powerful people who are now, they went through the revolving door, they've gone through the reverse revolving door in some cases, but they're doing the bidding of the LNG export industry, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
And the full report, obviously, on DeSmogBlog.com. Once again, link to it will be in the description of the video. Go to the website, check it out. Very worth your while. And Emma, I want to move on to you. While we're on the subject of this revolving door, you've just taken over as the executive director of DeSmog Canada. Welcome to your first DeSmogCast. We're very excited to have you with us today. In the United States, this revolving door between industry and regulators, you almost cannot find a single federal department that is not a victim of this. We've got the FDA, the Bureau of Land Management, everything, OSHA. They all have industry members coming and going all the time. And I want to ask you, with the perspective from Canada, do you see a similar trend happening up there?
It's a really good question. We hear about this kind of thing a lot less in Canada. And I think it's less a question of whether it's happening less and more a question of having a less robust independent media. So we just haven't tended to hear about it so much. There certainly are instances when you start looking for them. Just this week, in relation to the Edelman documents that Brendan was talking about, actually, one of the leads on that file for TransCanada moved straight over from being the director of communications for the New Democrat Party, which is the official opposition party in Canada. So that one's actually quite surprising to see someone coming from quite a progressive social and environmental party straight into being the lead on that Edelman strategy for TransCanada, which really looks to undermine the public interest and to put fake grassroots groups out into the public, essentially.
I know, obviously, so far today we've talked about a lot of slightly depressing matters, very important matters, all of these things that we've uncovered. But believe it or not, there is some pretty good news this week. In the past week, there were some elections up there in British Columbia. Emma, give us 10,000 foot of what happened up there.
Yeah, so this definitely is a good news story. On last Saturday, we held municipal elections here in British Columbia, which elects over 2,000 local elected officials. Now, for a long time, pipeline proposals through British Columbia, like Enbridge Northern Gateway and Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain, have really played out in the municipal arena. So the Union of BC Municipalities has in the past voted against any expansion of oil tanker traffic on our coast. And so this municipal election was seen as a real battleground for these elections. And because of that, companies like Kinder Morgan poured a lot of money into advertising campaigns during these elections. And yet what we saw on Saturday in the results was a real sweep of champions standing up for British Columbia's coast. So we saw Gregor Robertson with Vision Vancouver reelected in Vancouver. He's opposed to Kinder Morgan's plans through Vancouver. We had the Burnaby mayor, Derek Corrigan, reelected, who's also a real champion against Trans Mountain Pipeline. We had an anti-pipeline mayor elected in Victoria. And looking north to the Enbridge Northern Gateway proposal, the mayor of Kitimat is someone who has grilled Enbridge during the hearing process on their spill response capabilities. And the new mayor, Prince Rupert, had a video go viral from his presentation during the Enbridge hearings. And we have another champion elected in Smithers, British Columbia, which is another key place along that pipeline route. So most key places in the pipeline battles in British Columbia are governed by mayors who are quite staunchly opposed to these proposals.
And that was in spite of the massive amount of money that Kinder Morgan was pouring out there to try and sell their ideas, their politicians, their candidates, and you know, basically their pipeline to the public. Is that correct?
Exactly. And in Burnaby, which is the real battleground, because that's where the Trans Mountain Pipeline terminates and where they would like to triple the capacity of that pipeline, the mayor there won in an absolute landslide. I believe he won about 70% of the vote, and his campaign was really almost exclusively fought on this issue. So that's a real poll of public opinion in the fact that he won again. Another common character in the oil industry PR machine came out of the woodwork toward the end as well, Vivian Krause, who's someone who has attacked environmental groups and politicians who are linked to them over the years, and she came out compelling Vancouver voters not to vote for Gregor Robertson because of his links with these environmental groups that oppose oil expansion plans. And obviously that didn't work for them either.
Brendan, we've only got about a minute or two left here. After what we've seen this week in Canada, what we saw a few weeks ago in the U.S. midterms, we had a lot of environmental initiatives when people were allowed to directly vote on them that passed up there in Canada. Some very, you know, anti-dirty energy candidates became the victors in spite of all the money in both countries flying out to defeat all these proposals and politicians. Have we reached a point, possibly, where the days of the dirty energy industry's dominance might be going the way of fossil fuels?
I think you're absolutely right. I think we have seen the pinnacle of their success in that they're on the wane now. The grassroots, the actual grassroots, community level and public interest support for climate solutions, for clean energy is overwhelming. It's growing extremely fast. So all the corporations that are involved in fossil fuels are left with is their fake, grassroots, their AstroTurf. They can spend as much money as they can, but they're honestly losing, and they know it. And in a climate change world, in a carbon constrained world, their business models are outdated and dying in most cases. So we're seeing people understand that, recognize the need for solutions, that we have them at hand, and more and more people are rising up and getting involved in these issues, and that's a good thing. We see the public interest ignoring the AstroTurf masters at Edelman and elsewhere, and really pushing for the brighter future that we know is at hand.
And I don't want to be too self-congratulatory here for all of you, but a lot of it has to do with the work that all of you are doing at DeSmogBlog. And once again, Emma, Brendan, Steve, great work this week. We will check in with all of you next week again. And if you want to find any of these stories, you can go online, DeSmogBlog.com, DeSmog.ca, and DeSmog.uk. I am Farron Cousins, and we will see you next week right here on the DeSmogCast. Thanks for joining us.